Mom, we thought it would be easier if we handled this while you were away. Those were the first words my son said when I stepped out of the airport shuttle and saw a moving truck parked in front of my house. I stood there frozen, one hand still wrapped around the handle of my suitcase. For a moment, I honestly thought I had the wrong address. The white colonial house sat exactly where it always had, at the end of the quiet cul-de-sac in Cedar Ridge, Ohio. The flower beds I planted 20 years ago still line the walkway. The old maple tree my late husband and I had watched grow from a sapling still stretched over the front yard. Everything looked familiar. Everything except the truck. The bright blue logo on the side read Midwest Family Movers. Two men were carrying cardboard boxes down my front porch steps. My front porch steps? I blinked several times, trying to shake away the exhaustion from my trip. I had spent 10 days visiting my sister in Arizona. At 69 years old, I did not travel often anymore, but my sister had just recovered from surgery and needed company. Before I left, I had carefully locked every door, watered the plants, and left detailed instructions for my son Jason to check the mailbox twice a week. That was all. Nothing more. Certainly not permission to empty my house. One of the movers walked past me carrying a lamp. I recognized it immediately. It had stood beside my husband's reading chair for nearly 15 years. My stomach tightened. Then I noticed another box. And another. Family photographs. Kitchen supplies. Decorations from the living room. Pieces of my life. My heart began to pound. What's going on? I asked quietly. Jason appeared from the front doorway. He looked nervous for a split second before forcing a smile. Mom, you're back earlier than expected. Earlier? I had told him my exact flight weeks ago. Amanda stepped out behind him. My daughter-in-law wore a bright smile that never reached her eyes. Welcome home, Evelyn, she said. Home. The words sounded strange coming from her. I looked from the truck to the boxes scattered across the lawn. Why are my things outside? Neither of them answered immediately. Instead, they exchanged a glance. A quick glance. The kind people share when they have already rehearsed a conversation. That was when something cold settled inside my chest. Mom, Jason finally said, we thought it would be easier if we handled this while you were away. I stared at him. Handled what? Amanda folded her arms. The house situation. The house situation. As though my home had become some administrative inconvenience. I looked beyond them through the open front door. The entryway table was gone. The framed family portrait that usually hung above it had disappeared. Even the rug by the front entrance was missing. It felt like looking into a stranger's house. I don't understand, I said. Jason exhaled heavily. You've been alone since Dad passed. This house is too much for one person. There it was. The familiar explanation. The same one Amanda had been repeating for over a year. Too much house. Too much maintenance. Too many stairs. Too much responsibility. Every conversation somehow returned to the same topic. Selling. Downsizing. Moving. Leaving. I had always changed the subject. Apparently, they had decided to stop asking. A sedan pulled into the driveway behind me. A young couple stepped out and walked toward the house carrying a folder. Amanda immediately brightened. Perfect timing. My confusion deepened. The woman smiled politely at me before turning to Amanda. We're here for the viewing. Viewing. The word hit me harder than anything else. Amanda nodded enthusiastically. Come right in. Let me show you around. The couple walked past me as though I were invisible. As though I were simply another piece of furniture waiting to be moved. I watched them disappear through my front door. My front door. Jason avoided my eyes. Amanda followed the couple inside without another word. I stood alone in the driveway surrounded by boxes and strangers. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Everything felt oddly quiet. Too quiet. Then I noticed something resting on top of a cardboard box near the porch. A small manila envelope. My name was written across the front in handwriting I recognized. Instantly, my late husband's handwriting. And in that moment, I realized there was far more happening than either Jason or Amanda understood. I could barely breathe as I picked up the manila envelope. The familiar handwriting stopped the noise around me for a moment. The movers, the strangers walking through my house, even Amanda's cheerful voice drifting from the foyer seemed to fade into the background. My fingers trembled as I turned the envelope over. It had been sealed for years. There was a date in the corner. 3 years earlier. A few months before my husband, Robert, passed away. I stared at it for several seconds before slipping it carefully into my purse. Whatever was inside could wait. Right now, I needed to understand what was happening to my home. I walked toward the front door. No one stopped me. No one even acknowledged me. The young couple was standing in the living room, while Amanda pointed enthusiastically toward the fireplace. "The natural light is one of the best features," she said. "The natural light." I almost laughed. Robert and I had spent 2 entire weekends building the stone surround around that fireplace with our own hands. We had chosen every piece of stone ourselves. Yet Amanda spoke as though she were giving a tour of a model home she had personally designed. Jason stood near the dining room, looking uncomfortable. He shoved his hands into his pockets when he saw me enter. "Mom," he said quietly, "we should talk." I looked around the room. The shelves were half empty. Family photographs were gone. Decorative pieces collected during 40 years of marriage had disappeared. The house felt stripped of its history. "I think we should," I replied. The couple excused themselves and wandered toward the kitchen. Amanda followed them immediately. Jason and I were left standing alone for the first time since I arrived. "What exactly have you done?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he had carried since childhood whenever he knew he was in trouble. "We are trying to help you." I nodded slowly. "Help me by emptying my house." He sighed. "You cannot stay here forever." There it was again. The same phrase. The same assumption. The same decision already made without me. "I never said I was leaving," I answered. "You did not have to. Everybody knows you cannot manage this place forever." Everybody. Such a convenient word. It allowed people to hide behind an imaginary crowd instead of taking responsibility for their own choices. I looked toward the staircase. Every step carried memories. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. Late nights waiting for Jason to come home safely as a teenager. Robert carrying boxes upstairs when we first moved in. A lifetime lived between those walls. "Did you ask me what I wanted?" I said. Jason looked away. That silence told me everything. The answer was no. Amanda returned a few minutes later. Her smile tightened when she realized our conversation had not gone well. "The buyers love the property," she announced. "Property. Not home. Not family house. Property." I noticed the word immediately. Amanda always chose her words carefully. "Buyers?" I asked. "Nothing is finalized," she replied quickly. Too quickly. My stomach sank. Something had already been arranged. Something much larger than they were admitting. Just then my phone vibrated. The screen displayed a familiar name. Carol Whitman. My next-door neighbor for nearly 20 years. I stepped outside to answer. "Carol?" The moment she heard my voice, she sounded relieved. "Evelyn, thank goodness. I have been trying to reach you for days." My grip tightened around the phone. "Why?" There was a pause on the other end. Then Carol lowered her voice. "Because ever since you left town, strange things have been happening at your house. Real estate agents, contractors, trucks. Amanda has been telling people the place already belongs to them." I closed my eyes. The pieces were beginning to fit together. "There is something else," Carol continued. "Last week I saw Jason carrying boxes out of your study, the room where Robert kept all his important papers." My eyes opened immediately. The study, Robert's files, his records, his documents. Suddenly the envelope inside my purse felt heavier than before. And for the first time since arriving home, I realized this was never just about moving me out. They had been searching for something. The moment I ended the call with Carol, I stood still in the backyard without moving. The air felt different now, heavier, like something invisible had settled over everything I thought I knew. I looked back through the kitchen window where Jason and Amanda were still speaking with the couple who had come to view the house. They were smiling, polite, almost relaxed, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. As if my entire life had not just been reduced to moving boxes and strangers walking through my rooms. I walked slowly back inside, my footsteps quiet against the hardwood floor. Jason noticed me immediately. His expression tightened, as though he was bracing himself for a conversation he did not want to have. Amanda excused herself and followed the prospective buyers toward the hallway, leaving me alone with my son once again. I stopped near the staircase, resting one hand lightly on the banister. This was the same staircase Robert had carried me up laughing on the night we first moved in, the same steps Jason had fallen down as a child and cried until I held him for nearly an hour. Now it felt like none of that mattered to him anymore. "Mom," Jason said again, softer this time, "we are doing what we think is best for you." I turned my head slowly toward him. "Best for me or best for you?" He exhaled, and looked away. That was all the answer I needed. I reached into my purse and touched the envelope again. The paper felt worn in my hands now, as if it had been waiting too long to be opened. I did not take it out yet. Something inside me told me the timing still mattered. Jason stepped closer. Amanda has already spoken with a realtor, he said carefully. We can get a good price for the house, and you will be comfortable somewhere smaller. Comfortable. That word again. As if comfort could replace memory. As if shrinking my life down to a small apartment was an act of kindness instead of removal. I studied his face. There was something rehearsed in his tone, something that did not belong to him. It belonged to someone else influencing him. Amanda reappeared in the hallway just as I was about to speak. They love the kitchen, she said. Brightly. We might need to schedule a second showing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. Without asking me. Without even pretending anymore. I walked past them into the study. The door had been left slightly open. Inside, the room looked different. Not just empty, but disturbed. The desk drawers were partially open. Papers had been shifted. Robert's filing cabinet stood unlocked. I stepped closer slowly. My fingers touched the edge of the desk where Robert used to sit every evening reading financial documents and writing notes in his careful handwriting. There were folders missing. Not random ones. Specific ones. The ones labeled with legal seals. My heart tightened. Carol's words returned to me. Contractors. Boxes. The study. I turned quickly and went back into the hallway. Amanda was now alone, scrolling through her phone as if she owned the space. Jason stood near the front door, speaking quietly to someone on the phone. I approached Amanda directly. Where are Robert's files? I asked. She looked up slowly, her expression not surprised but controlled. We are just organizing things, she said. Organizing. Another careful word. I took one step closer. Those files are not yours to organize. Her smile faded slightly. Jason is trying to protect you from stress. Protect me. I almost laughed, but the sound never came. Jason ended his call and joined us. Mom, please do not make this harder than it needs to be, he said. I looked at both of them standing there, united in something I was no longer part of. That was when I understood it clearly. This was not just about the house. It was about control. About decisions already made in rooms I was never invited into. About my life being rearranged while I was away, like furniture being shifted without permission. I stepped back slowly. Neither of them moved. The envelope in my purse felt heavier again, almost urgent now. I realized then that whatever Robert had left me, whatever message he had prepared before he died, it was no longer just something from the past. It was something I needed right now, before they finished rewriting everything I thought I owned. The study felt colder the longer I stood inside it. I could not tell anymore if it was the air conditioning or the realization settling deeper into my chest. Every corner of the room carried Robert's presence, yet at the same time everything had been disturbed, as if someone had walked through his memories with no hesitation. I slowly opened one of the drawers that had been left half open. Inside, folders were scattered in a way Robert would never have allowed. He was precise, careful, almost ritualistic about how he organized his records. I ran my fingers lightly over the papers, noticing immediately that several important documents were missing. Not random ones. Specific legal files. The kind that mattered. My breath slowed as I stepped back and looked around the room again. This was not careless searching. This was deliberate. Someone had been looking for something they believed was valuable enough to rearrange an entire life. I walked to the far wall where Robert's old safe had once been hidden behind a painting. The painting was still there, but slightly tilted. My pulse tightened. I reached out and touched it. The frame moved too easily. The safe was no longer locked properly. I stepped back immediately. That was when Jason appeared in the doorway. He saw me looking at the wall and froze for a fraction of a second before recovering. Mom, he said, his voice tense, you should not be in here right now. I turned slowly toward him. Why? He hesitated. Amanda appeared behind him again, her presence immediate and controlled. We are trying to make this transition easier for you, she said. Transition. Another word that did not belong to me. I looked at both of them, standing together in the doorway of a room that had belonged to my husband for decades. Where are Robert's legal documents? I asked quietly. Jason sighed. They are being reviewed. By who? Amanda answered instead. By professionals. For your own protection. I almost let out a laugh, but instead I felt something colder take its place. Protection. I had spent 40 years building a life with Robert. I had managed households, raised Jason, supported every decision they had ever made. Now I was being told I needed protection from my own memories. I walked past them without another word and returned to the living room. The prospective buyers were no longer there. The house felt quieter now, almost staged, as if the performance had paused waiting for the next act. I noticed something new on the coffee table. A stack of printed papers, real estate documents, preliminary listing agreements. My name was already printed on several lines, faint but visible, as though someone had assumed it would eventually be approved. Amanda followed me into the room. "We can finalize everything within the week," she said casually. "The market is very strong right now." I picked up the papers slowly. My eyes scanned the text. There were sections highlighted already. Sections that required my signature. Sections that would transfer control. I placed the papers back down carefully. "I never agreed to this," I said. Jason entered behind her. "We are trying to help you avoid stress," he repeated, but his voice lacked certainty now. I turned to him. "Do not confuse control with help." The words hung in the air between us. For the first time, Jason did not respond immediately. Amanda stepped forward. "Evelyn, you are making this more difficult than it needs to be." My name sounded different coming from her. Formal, detached, as if I were already outside of the family she was speaking for. I looked at her closely. There was something behind her confidence. Not cruelty exactly. Strategy. Planning. As if every move had been discussed long before I ever walked through that front door. I reached into my purse again. The envelope was still there. Still sealed. Still waiting. Jason noticed my hand. "What is that?" he asked. I did not answer. Instead, I turned slightly away from both of them. For a brief moment, I thought about Robert sitting in this same house years ago, reading quietly while I prepared dinner, telling me that some things were never as simple as they appeared. I realized then that whatever he had left behind was not just a message. It was a key, and I was standing in the middle of a house that someone else had already begun to unlock. The silence in the living room felt heavier after Jason and Amanda stopped speaking. It was not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the kind that comes from decisions already made without your permission. I stood there still holding the edge of the coffee table, my eyes fixed on the stack of real estate documents they had placed so confidently in front of me. Amanda was the first to move, stepping closer with a practiced smile that no longer reached her eyes. "Evelyn, we are not trying to push you out," she said softly, as if choosing each word carefully. "We are trying to simplify things for everyone involved." Simplify. That word again. I slowly released my grip on the table and looked at her. Simplify my life by removing me from it. Jason shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. He looked younger in that moment, almost like the boy I had once raised, but the familiarity did not soften what was happening. If anything, it made it harder to accept. "Mom, it is not like that," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I glanced between them. There was something rehearsed in their posture, in the way they avoided each other's eyes for more than a second. This was not a sudden decision. This had been planned. I felt the envelope inside my purse again, heavier now, almost as if it was reminding me it existed. Before I could speak, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the tension sharply. Amanda exhaled in relief and quickly moved toward the entryway. "That must be the realtor again," she said. I watched her leave the room, then turned to Jason. "How long has this been arranged?" I asked quietly. Jason hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any answer could. "A few weeks," he finally admitted. "A few weeks. While I was visiting my sister. While I was away trusting them with everything I had built." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting that reality settle. When I opened them again, I was calmer than before. Not because the situation was easier, but because something inside me had shifted into focus. Amanda returned with a man in his 50s wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather folder. He greeted me politely, introducing himself as the listing agent. His tone was professional, detached, the tone of someone who had done this many times before. He began speaking about pricing, market trends, and potential buyers, but I stopped listening after the first few sentences. Instead, I studied Jason's face as the man spoke. My son nodded occasionally, as if agreeing to a future that had already been written without me. "This property has excellent potential," the agent said, gesturing toward the windows, "especially with the renovations planned." "Renovations?" I turned slightly. "What renovations?" Amanda answered quickly. Just minor updates. Nothing you need to worry about. Nothing I need to worry about. The phrase landed differently now. Everything they were saying was designed to exclude me from my own life, while making it sound considerate. I reached into my purse again, this time fully removing the envelope. Both Jason and Amanda noticed immediately. The realtor paused mid-sentence. "What is that?" he asked. I did not answer him. My attention was fixed on Jason. "Your father's handwriting is on this," I said calmly. Jason frowned slightly. "Mom, maybe we should focus on the house for now." I ignored him and carefully opened the envelope for the first time since returning home. The paper inside was aged, folded with precision, as if it had been preserved with intention rather than time. I unfolded it slowly. Amanda shifted uncomfortably beside the realtor. Jason stepped closer, trying to see what I was holding. As my eyes scanned the first lines, I felt the room change. Not physically, but in the way everything suddenly aligned. Robert's words were clear, deliberate, and unmistakably formal. There were names, instructions, and references to documents I had never seen before. And at the bottom, a signature I recognized instantly. I lowered the paper slightly. Jason looked at me, now uncertain. For the first time since I arrived, Amanda did not speak. The realtor glanced between us, sensing that something had shifted but not understanding what. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Then I looked at both of them. "You should not have started this without reading everything first," I said quietly. Jason's expression tightened. "What does that mean?" I did not answer immediately. Instead, I turned toward the hallway where Robert's study was located. The door was still slightly open. The house felt different now, not because it had changed, but because I finally understood it had been changed without me. And somewhere inside that envelope, Robert had already prepared for exactly this moment. The moment I placed the envelope back into my purse, I felt a strange shift in the atmosphere of the room. It was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable. Jason was watching me more closely now, as if trying to predict what I would do next. Amanda had stopped speaking entirely, her earlier confidence replaced with something more cautious. Even the realtor seemed uncertain, glancing between us as though he had stepped into a conversation that no longer followed a normal script. I did not move immediately. Instead, I stood very still, letting the weight of Robert's handwriting settle inside me. Whatever he had written, it was not meant for them. It was meant for me, and only me. At the exact moment everything began to fall apart. Jason broke the silence first. "Mom, we can go over the paperwork later," he said, forcing a lighter tone. "Right now we just need to focus on getting everything organized." Organized. That word again, as if my life were a collection of objects to be sorted rather than a history to be respected. I turned toward him slowly. "You have been organizing my life without me," I said quietly. Jason's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Amanda stepped forward immediately, her voice smoother, more controlled. "Evelyn, this is not about removing you from anything. This is about making sure you are taken care of properly." Taken care of. I studied her carefully now. There was no hesitation in her words, only certainty. The certainty of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. Before I could respond, the realtor cleared his throat gently. "Perhaps I should come back at another time," he said, sensing the tension rising. Amanda quickly shook her head. "No, it is fine. We are just finalizing some family details." Family details. As if I were not part of that family. As if I were an external factor, interfering with a business transaction. I watched him leave toward the front door without protest. The moment the door closed behind him, the silence became heavier than before. Jason ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, please just listen for a minute," he said. "We are not trying to hurt you." I looked at him for a long moment. He avoided my eyes almost immediately. That avoidance told me everything I needed to know. I took one step back, then another, until I was standing near the staircase again. The house felt larger now, but not in a comforting way. It felt divided, as if every room had been assigned a different ownership without my consent. Amanda followed my movement with her eyes. "Evelyn, where are you going?" she asked carefully. I did not answer. Instead, I turned toward the hallway leading to Robert's study again. Jason moved slightly as if to stop me, then hesitated. That hesitation was enough. I walked down the hallway slowly. Each step felt deliberate. The study door was still ajar, exactly as I had left it earlier. I pushed it open. Inside, Nothing had changed since the last time I stood there, yet everything felt different now. The absence of order in Robert's desk no longer felt like negligence. It felt like interruption. Someone had been searching here with purpose. I moved toward the safe hidden behind the painting. My fingers hovered near the frame, but did not touch it yet. I could hear footsteps behind me. Jason had followed. Amanda was still in the living room, but I could hear her voice faintly speaking on the phone, lower now, urgent. Jason stopped at the doorway. "Mom, please do not do this," he said. I turned slightly toward him. "Do what exactly?" He hesitated again, struggling to find words that would not expose too much. That was when I understood something important. They were no longer just trying to convince me. They were trying to delay me. I faced the painting fully and gently moved it aside. The safe was exposed. The lock had been tampered with. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling something inside me grow colder and clearer at the same time. Jason's voice lowered. "We thought it was already empty," he said quietly. That sentence changed everything. I turned to him slowly. "Empty," I repeated. Jason did not answer immediately. His silence confirmed what I already suspected. Amanda appeared in the doorway again, her expression no longer neutral. There was tension now, sharper than before. "Evelyn," she said carefully, "maybe we should all sit down and talk about this calmly." I looked at both of them standing in my husband's study, speaking as if they belonged here more than I did. Then I reached into my purse again and held the envelope firmly in my hand. This time, I did not hide it. Jason's eyes locked onto it instantly. Amanda's posture changed slightly. And in that moment, I realized whatever Robert had left behind was not just information. It was the one thing neither of them had been able to find, and the only thing that still had the power to change everything already in motion. Jason did not move when I held the envelope in my hand. He was watching it like it was something he already feared but could not yet name. Amanda, standing slightly behind him, had gone completely still. The confidence she had carried earlier in the living room was gone now, replaced by a controlled silence that felt forced rather than natural. I stood in Robert's study with the envelope pressed lightly against my palm, feeling the weight of years inside a simple piece of paper. The air felt tighter in that room, as if even the walls were listening. Jason finally spoke, his voice lower than before. "Mom, where did you get that?" I looked at him without answering immediately. For a moment, I studied my own son, trying to understand when he had stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. "Your father left it for me," I said calmly. Amanda stepped forward immediately. "That is not possible," she said, too quickly, too sharply. I turned slightly toward her. "Why is that not possible?" She hesitated for just a second before forcing a softer tone. "Because all of Robert's documents were handled properly after his passing." The way she said it revealed more than her words. She had already assumed control over something that did not belong to her. Jason exhaled and looked toward the safe behind the painting. "We already checked everything in here," he said. There was nothing useful left. Nothing useful. I repeated the phrase silently in my mind. Not nothing important. Not nothing personal. Nothing useful. That was the language of people who believed value was only measured in control. I took a step closer to the desk and placed the envelope down on its surface without opening it yet. "You checked everything?" I asked. Jason nodded. Amanda added quickly. "We were just making sure nothing was left exposed or misplaced." Misplaced. Another careful word. I looked at the safe again. The lock had been tampered with, but not opened correctly. Someone had tried and failed, or stopped halfway. I could feel Robert's presence in that detail, in the way things were never left unfinished without reason. Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we should talk about this later," he said. I shook my head slowly. "No, we will talk about it now." My voice was steady, but something in the room changed when I said it. Amanda crossed her arms, her patience visibly thinning. "Evelyn, we are trying to protect you from making emotional decisions," she said. I turned toward her fully. "Protect me from what exactly?" She did not answer immediately. That silence again. That hesitation that revealed more than any confession. Jason stepped between us slightly, as if trying to soften the tension. "Dad is gone," he said carefully. "We are just trying to make sure everything is handled fairly." The mention of Robert made something inside me tighten. I reached for the envelope again and finally opened it. The paper inside was folded neatly, preserved with deliberate care. My eyes scanned the first line slowly. Legal language, precise and structured, but beneath it something unmistakably intentional. I recognized Robert's way of thinking immediately. He never wrote anything without purpose. As I read further, my breathing slowed. Jason noticed the change in my expression. "What is it?" he asked. I did not answer right away. Instead, I continued reading until I reached a section that made everything around me fall into place. Amanda noticed the shift too. Her posture stiffened slightly. "Evelyn," she said more carefully now, "what does it say?" I lowered the paper slowly. For the first time since I had returned home, I looked at both of them not as my family, but as people standing on the opposite side of something they did not fully understand. "It says," I said quietly, "that none of you were ever authorized to make decisions about this house without me." Jason frowned immediately. "That cannot be right." But his voice lacked certainty now. Amanda stepped forward quickly. "There must be some misunderstanding," she said, but her tone had changed. Less confident, more urgent. I folded the document again and placed it carefully back into the envelope. The study felt different now, as if the air itself had shifted direction. I turned toward the safe one more time, then back to them. "Your father did not leave me nothing," I said. "He left me everything I needed to understand what you have been doing." Jason's face tightened, and for the first time, he did not respond immediately. Amanda looked toward the hallway, as if calculating her next move. And in that silence, I realized the truth was no longer hidden in this house. It had already been written long before I ever walked back through the front door. The moment I finished speaking, the study fell into a silence so dense it felt almost physical. Jason looked at me as if he was trying to process words he had never expected to hear from me. Amanda, however, reacted differently. Her expression tightened, and for the first time since I returned home, her calm mask cracked slightly at the edges. She took a step forward, her voice lower but sharper. "Evelyn, that document is outdated," she said quickly. "It does not reflect the current situation." I held her gaze without moving. "Current situation?" I repeated slowly. Jason shifted beside her. "Mom, please, let us just explain," he said, but there was a new uncertainty in his tone now. I noticed it immediately. The confidence they had carried earlier was dissolving. Amanda glanced at him briefly before speaking again. "We were only trying to make practical decisions," she said. "The house is too large, too expensive to maintain. Alone. We thought it would be better if everything was handled before things became complicated." Before things became complicated. I almost smiled at that phrase. Everything they had done had already made things complicated. I walked past them slowly and returned to the living room. The realtor's documents were still on the coffee table. I picked up one page and looked at it again. My signature line was still empty, yet they had already acted as if it were signed. Jason followed me into the room. Amanda stayed near the hallway, watching carefully. "Mom," Jason said again, softer now, "we did not mean to disrespect you." I placed the paper back down. "You did not ask me once," I said. "Not one time." Jason opened his mouth, but no words came out immediately. That silence was different now. It was not rehearsed. It was uncertain. Amanda stepped into the room again. "Evelyn, we thought you would agree once you saw the situation clearly," she said. I turned toward her slowly. "You thought I would agree to be removed from my own home?" Her eyes flickered briefly, and I saw something behind her composure. Frustration. Pressure. A need for control slipping away. Jason ran a hand across his face. "We are not trying to remove you," he said, but even he did not sound convinced anymore. I walked toward the window and looked outside. The moving truck was still there. Some of the boxes had already been loaded. My life was physically leaving the property while I stood inside it. That realization did not shock me anymore. It clarified everything. I turned back toward them. "Who authorized the movers?" I asked. Amanda answered immediately. "Jason did." Jason nodded slightly, but his expression tightened. "I thought it was what needed to be done," he said quietly. I studied him carefully. "Based on what?" He hesitated again. That hesitation told me more than anything else. Amanda stepped closer to him, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "We were told the house was already being transferred," she said, "by the attorney handling Robert's estate." My attention sharpened instantly. "Which attorney?" I asked. Amanda hesitated for the first time. Jason answered instead. "A man named Richard Coleman." The name landed heavily in the room. I felt something inside me shift again. Not fear. Recognition. Robert had never mentioned that name casually. If Richard Coleman was involved, then this situation had already moved far beyond assumptions or misunderstandings. I reached into my purse and held the envelope again. This time, I did not open it. I simply held it. Jason watched me closely. "Mom, what does that letter actually say?" he asked. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "It says your father anticipated all of this," I said quietly. Amanda frowned. "That is impossible." But her voice lacked certainty now. I took a slow breath. "And it says something else," I continued. "It says the person who controls this house is not who you assumed it would be." Jason's expression changed slightly. "What are you saying?" he asked. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I turned toward the hallway again, toward Robert's study, toward everything that had been disturbed but not fully understood. The truth was no longer hidden in pieces of paper or locked safes. It was already unfolding around us. And for the first time since stepping back into this house, I realized I was not the one being pushed out of it. I was the one still holding the final decision. The house felt quieter than it had ever felt before, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes after something irreversible has already begun. Jason stood near the center of the living room, no longer speaking, as if waiting for instructions that would never come. Amanda remained near the hallway, her posture now less certain, her earlier control replaced with visible tension. I stood between them and the window, holding the envelope in my hand without opening it again. The paper inside no longer felt like a secret. It felt like confirmation. Jason finally broke the silence. "Mom, please just tell us what is in that letter," he said. His voice was no longer firm. It was searching. Amanda stepped forward slightly, but stopped herself before getting too close. "Evelyn, whatever Robert wrote, it must be outdated," she said quickly. I looked at her calmly. "Outdated?" I repeated. "Or inconvenient?" That question made her pause. Jason looked between us, his confusion growing. I could see it now, clearly. They were no longer certain they were in control of the situation. That realization did not come as satisfaction. It came as clarity. I walked slowly toward the coffee table and placed the envelope down in front of them. Neither of them touched it. "Your father did not leave this house in silence," I said quietly. Jason frowned. "What does that mean?" I opened the envelope again. This time, I did not hesitate. I unfolded the document fully and placed it flat on the table. The handwriting at the bottom was unmistakable. Robert's signature, precise and deliberate. I pointed at the section he needed to see. Jason leaned forward slightly. Amanda did the same, but carefully, as if afraid of what she might find. As they read, the room changed again. Jason's expression tightened slowly, line by line. Amanda's confidence drained almost completely. "That is not possible," she whispered. I did not respond. I let them read it again. Jason shook his head slightly. "No, this must be a misunderstanding," he said, but his voice was no longer steady. Amanda's hands moved slightly, as if she wanted to take the paper but stopped herself. "He could not have done this without telling us," she said. I looked at her directly. "He did not do it for you," I replied. Silence followed. A deeper silence than before. Jason stepped back slightly, his face pale now, as if the structure he had been standing on was no longer stable. "So what does this mean?" he asked. I answered slowly. "It means you did not inherit control of anything you thought you did." Amanda's breathing changed slightly. She turned toward Jason. "We need to call Richard Coleman," she said quickly. Jason nodded, but he did not move immediately. The certainty they had carried into this house was gone now, replaced by something fragile and uncertain. I watched them carefully. For the first time since I returned, they were not acting as if they owned the outcome. They were reacting to it. I reached into my purse again and closed my hand around the envelope one last time. I did not need to read it again. I already understood what Robert had prepared. He had not left confusion behind. He had left structure. And that structure was now beginning to take effect in real time, right in front of all of us. I looked at Jason, then at Amanda, and finally at the house itself. Everything they had tried to reorganize was still standing exactly where it had always been. The only thing that had changed was who finally understood the truth.